Got my cup of coffee, and I think it's now time to review the Canon G7X against the camera that I'm recording this with, which is the Sony RX100 V. Let's jump straight into the video. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to a brand new video here on my YouTube channel. And for those of you that are new around here and don't know who I am, my name's Aaron and I create travel, photography and videography based content just like this video here on YouTube. So if that is something that will interest you, be sure to subscribe to the channel. But as you can tell by the title and that quick intro, today I'm going to be discussing why I believe buying the Canon G7X Mark II in 2019 is still worth it. And I'm going to be putting it head to head with this camera. As you probably know if you follow my channel, this is the Sony RX100 V that I have been using so often here on my channel. I'm going to be putting the two cameras head to head today to see which I prefer, as I have recently switched to the Canon G7X, but I'm not too sure if it will be for long. I'm going to be keeping both cameras, comparing them and giving you examples of everything in today's video. So if you do find it useful at any point, be sure to let me know by leaving a like. If you've used either of these two cameras as well, do let me know down in the comment section. Let me know what you thought of them. And check out the linked playlist on screen right now, which is some more related content just like this one. But let's just jump straight to the video. Okay, so I'm going to be starting off with some positives, some good things about the Sony RX100, then moving on to the Canon G7X, and then we'll do the negatives for both cameras. So there is two clear and obvious positives for the Sony RX100 Mark V. This is not the Mark VI, just before we carry on. Want to make that clear, this is the Mark V. But the two clear and obvious positives are that it does record in 4K and it does have the option of 120 frames per second, two things which the Canon G7X Mark II does not have. So they are great positives. Now, whilst the 4K is a bit overkill, it's not something I used all the time. It was cool to capture some scenarios where I thought something would just look a bit better in 4K. And whilst I don't actually upload it in 4K, it does actually get down-resed in Premiere Pro. I do feel the footage looks a bit sharper, a bit crisper, and just a bit more appealing to the eye to say when you're actually putting it in Premiere Pro and then processing it. So whilst I don't actually use 4K that much, it is a great option to have. And then in terms of 120 frames per second, the Canon G7X Mark II only goes up to 60 FPS, and I do rarely miss the 120 FPS, to be honest. That's why I'm keeping this camera for now, because I may actually just use the two, run with both, use that one for slow-mo and the 4K, and then use this one for vlogging, as I'm going to get into some of the positives about this camera a bit later. But them two main features are excellent with the Sony RX100 and the Sony line, and they are great to have in such a small camera, a pocket-sized camera. It's a great option to have. Now, another huge positive, which I didn't really make the most of, but it is a great option for filmmakers, is that the Sony RX100 Mark V does actually shoot with a log profile. You do actually have S-Log2 on there, and that's just great for shooting a flat image, because then you can really put your own personalized color correction onto it. Whereas with the Canon camera, you do actually have the option to adjust some settings, but it's not the same customization available like on the Sony camera, where there are absolutely loads of options. You can go Cine 2, you can go S-Log2, you can go still. There's all different types, cinema, stuff like that. There's all different types of picture profiles, and then obviously you can not actually use a picture profile if you don't want. And I actually imported EOS HD settings, which made the colors quite decent, but that was one thing that I could never quite nail down with the Sony camera, was the color grading in post-production. But to actually have the option of using S-Log2 was really, really handy, especially if you're trying to get that film look. Now, another great thing about the Sony RX100 Mark V was the autofocus was absolutely out of this world. I'd go as far as to say it's the fastest autofocus pocket camera, compact camera, whatever you want to call them, these vlogging cameras as a lot of people do call them. It had the best autofocus, and whilst the specs on other cameras may actually say that their autofocusing system is better, there is absolutely no chance in this world it was. And I really do miss the autofocus. Whilst the autofocus on the Canon camera is decent, it does have problems sometimes trying to track the face, and it sometimes tries to get the background in focus when you just don't want it to. So it's a bit of a pain, and that's one thing I'm starting to learn with this camera, whereas the Sony absolutely killed it every single time. Now, another huge positive with the Sony RX100 Mark V was the 100 megabits a second quality that you could get out of the camera when recording, obviously at 4K or 120 frames per second. It was just incredible to have that, and you could really tell the difference in the quality between the two cameras from just testing stuff out. I can still tell it just by looking at it in Premiere Pro. To let alone say that it's noticeable on YouTube, I'm sure you guys can figure that out. Just to have that option again was great, whilst I didn't use it that much. But in terms of my vlogging style, where I do like to use a lot of B-roll, a lot of slow motion, that's when you can really tell, and it is a bit of a pain not having that on the Canon. And then one of the final positives for the Sony RX100 Mark V is more of a personalization thing. Because I've had this camera for so long, the ease of use with it has just been incredible. I've just gotten so used to just some small shortcuts, just quick setup and being able to shoot with it really, really quickly. Whereas it's taken me a bit longer to actually get into the groove kind of thing of actually using this Canon camera, because obviously there's all different types of settings, different types of menus, and whilst the menus are actually simpler, which is something I will get onto in a moment, it does just seem like I can use this Sony camera a bit better, purely because I've had a lot of practice with it and a lot of use. I'm sure that will come with time with the Canon camera, but right now Sony is winning hands down on that front. Now let's talk about some of the positives from this Canon G7X Mark II, and the biggest one that I can think of that just comes straight to mind is the colors straight out of camera. The picture profile I'm actually shooting on right now is just the regular one that they give you. I've tweaked a couple of things like the contrast and saturation, but apart from that, it's literally just as it would be straight out of camera. And I noticed that the second I got this camera, I literally turned it on, pointed it at myself and done a little bit of a test vlog, and the colors were literally spot on. And I've always known about that with Canon cameras, because I've actually owned a G7X probably about 4 or 5 years ago, but I wasn't really vlogging with it, so I got rid of it. But I could tell back then that obviously there was a lot less work in post-production that you needed to do, when obviously I compared it with the Sony camera, which I obviously got some time back, and I realized you've got to color grade pretty much everything, but that does give you part of the creative process that you need. So there's a positive and negative in that. I do like to color grade, so it does kind of take that away, but just to have the ease of use, especially when I'm traveling, where I just know the colors are spot on, that will probably come in very, very handy. Now, another huge positive, as I mentioned before, is the autofocus. It's still very, very good, but when you're used to having the Sony camera, it feels like it's slacking ever so slightly. But if I honestly never used the Sony RX100 Mark V or any Sony camera in the past, I wouldn't even be complaining, because the autofocus is absolutely superb, because you have the touch screen, which is another big positive, which I'm including as another point. You have the touch screen at the back, so you can just lock your focus on by touching on it, and obviously navigating the menus and stuff like that, you can just touch the screen, which is a lot easier than this Sony RX100, where you cannot touch the back screen, which was always a pain because you had to use the wheel or your fingers, and often you'd be clicking the wrong thing purely because the size of the wheel in which you select the menus is so small compared to a person's hands. So having that touchscreen ability just makes life so much easier, and you can literally change any setting you want to very, very quickly, which does help significantly. And just diving into that menu system a tiny bit more, as I mentioned before, the menu system is a lot simpler. I believe there's literally only 3 or 4 sections, compared to the Sony, which has about 10 sections and a lot more within each section, whereas the Canon camera, it's literally as straightforward. There's 3-4 sections, and it's just very, very basic camera settings, which pretty much everyone will know what they mean. So it's very, very easy to set up. And obviously the dial on the top, there's pictures, so you can literally tell what's for video, what's for just regular shooting in manual mode, auto mode, shutter priority, aperture priority. It's very, very easy to navigate, which is another big bonus for the Canon G7X Mark II. Now, I've left one of the Canon positives out because I wanted to talk about it in comparison to the Sony RX100 biggest downfall, which is kind of why I'm debating not using this camera. And I've tried to sort things out with Sony. I've tried to send it off to them, and they've literally just said it's £160 to send it off to us, and that's even if we don't do anything. And then if we do something, it's going to be like an extra £100, so it's £260 just to get the camera repaired when there's a clear fault with it, which has really annoyed me, which is kind of why I've gone to Canon, because that's just really ruined my experience with Sony, because before that I really, really liked them as a brand. But it is the audio issues that I've had with my Sony camera. I'll show you some sample footage on screen right now. but it's just got this horrible whistling sound, which has been apparent from pretty much day one. And I've tried to get it sorted with Sony. I've tried to get it sorted with the shop that I bought it from, but just had absolutely no luck. And the noise itself actually comes from within the camera, and it's right near the microphone, so it gets picked up very, very easily. So no matter how loud I talk when I'm vlogging without my microphone attached to me, which I can't really walk around vlogging with my phone wired up and a microphone attached to me because it's just not practical, because then I've got to literally click record every time I want to say something. So I do actually have to use the camera's internal audio. And because it overpowers anything else that it picks up, you can just hear this whistling noise constantly, which annoyed me so much, whereas the Canon G7X audio actually surprised me so much. It's actually brilliant. It's not close to having a microphone plugged in, because obviously any professional microphone is better than a camera's internal microphone, but just the audio level differences, it's completely different levels, and I'm very, very happy to say that, because it means that I can use the Canon G7X II vlog and not have to worry about this awful noise which is just going to wreck any footage. So that is a huge positive when it comes to the Canon G7X. Now, a few other negatives with the Sony camera, and I don't want to dwell on them too much because they are very insignificant, but it is the overheating issue when especially recording in 4K or somewhere hot, which is the only slight issue for me, because obviously being a travel vlogger, I don't really go to places that are freezing. I go to places that are quite warm, quite tropical, and if your camera can't deal with the heat, it's a bit of a pain in the ass when you want to record stuff during the middle of the day. And I've often had my camera just say, I'm overheating, I'm going to shut down, come back in 5 minutes. That's not ideal if you want to get the shot, and that's why I'm kind of considering having both cameras, because if one dies due to overheating whilst I'm out filming stuff, when I'm vlogging, traveling, when it's warm, I can just switch to the other one, let that one cool down, let it have its moment, it needs a rest, and then I can just switch out to the other one. But it was a problem, especially when recording in 4K or slow motion 120 frames per second as well. It did happen a lot, which wasn't ideal, but obviously I understand it's a very small camera. It's probably very, very difficult to keep the temperature of the camera at ease, at a good level, especially due to the power that it's got, and then obviously the size of the camera itself. Now, one other negative, which I've kind of touched upon, is the colors out of camera, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but you do actually have to do a lot of work to get the colors right with the Sony camera. I feel like I did finally get that right, but obviously, as I said, if you're not experienced with color grading or you don't want to put that time in, it was a bit of a pain. And then the final negative with the Sony RX100 Mark V is the price. When I bought it, it was £1,000. Obviously, there's a new one, the Mark VI, that has come out, so that has took this price down, but it's still quite expensive, and especially if you're getting into vlogging. A lot of people try to get into vlogging after Christmas if they get some money for Christmas. That is not an affordable camera, especially for the kind of age range that get into vlogging, late teens, stuff like that. You don't want to be going spending nearly £1,000 or over £1,000 if you want to get the Mark VI on your first camera. It's not an ideal situation to put yourself in. Now, in terms of some negatives for the Canon G7X, as I mentioned, the no 120 frames per second is really killing me. I just love slow motion. You can probably tell by watching any of my videos, I do love slow motion. My latest video, which was the hostel hacks, I used 60 FPS for some of the shots where I was like fiddling around with like the padlocks and stuff like that, just to show them for a bit of B-roll. And it just didn't look the same as 120 FPS. It's double the time slower. It's so much smoother, so much nicer, and that's one of the big reasons I'm still clinging on to the Sony RX100 Mark V, because I just love that 120 FPS. And then, as I mentioned, there's no 4K capabilities, which I don't use a lot of, but when you're traveling in some amazing countries and you see something that's just unbelievable and you just want to capture it for all of its glory, switching the camera into 4K mode and just getting it out and getting the camera, getting the shot, getting the 4K clip, it just does it so much more justice, and I probably will miss that if I did get rid of the Sony RX100 Mark V. Now, in terms of the question that is in the title, is the Canon G7X Mark II still worth buying in 2019? I'm going to say yes, but here are a few considerations. Now, there is a potential Canon G7X Mark III rumored to be releasing at some point this year, but I say take that with a pinch of salt, because that was the exact same rumor as last year in 2018. And that never prevailed into anything. We never got to see the camera. We never even got anything confirmed. There was a lot of rumors that it was going to be released by now in January. They said mid-January at the absolute latest. I'm recording this on the 15th of January and there's still nothing here. I consider that the middle of January and we still don't even have anything confirmed. So do consider that, because I do think it will be this year. Just when is the big question, because it could be late this year. I also believe all pocket cameras, especially from Canon and Sony, because they are the two leading camera manufacturers in my opinion, should have 4K or at least 120 frames per second, because the technology's there. Sony can do it, Canon should be able to do it, and especially with the market for this camera, I believe the market for the Canon G7X has to be vloggers, because that many people use them for vlogging. You literally see all the big travel vloggers, everyone just uses these cameras for their practicability and the ease of use, that you can literally slide it into your pocket and go traveling with it, and it's just a great option. So I do feel like they should have one of them two options at least, if not both, within the camera itself. And then the big consideration, this isn't just for Canon, but this is also for Sony, and I doubt this video is ever going to stumble across either Canon or Sony employees or anyone who can have any influence on this, but I would absolutely love if one of the two companies put a microphone input in the camera itself, because it would just be an absolute lifesaver. If you put a mic input so we can have an external microphone, audio device, whatever it may be, we can put it on a stand, it would just make everything so much better, because the audio is the biggest downfall with every camera that doesn't have a mic input. So whichever brand does it first, if Canon does it first, I'm going to stick with that camera, because then it becomes the best travel camera of all time. If Sony does it first, then I will stick with Sony, because they become the best travel camera makers of all time. So if any of the two brands do stick a mic input into their pocket-sized cameras, their travel cameras, their compact cameras, it would just be a life-saving decision that they've made, and it will make a lot of people happy. So if any of them do it, I'm going for that camera straight away. But that is all for this video. I hope you did enjoy, and I hope you enjoyed the examples that I have given for both cameras. As I mentioned, I'm going to keep hold of both of them for now, but I probably will cut it down to one, because at the end of the day, I don't need both. I do need to make a decision on which is better for my travel style. So if you do want to help me decide on that, let me know by leaving a comment down below. Leave a like on the video and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. And as I mentioned in the last video, I'm going to be announcing a trip very, very shortly. So do stay tuned for that, because I cannot wait to let you guys know what I'm going to be doing, and I can't wait for the trip itself. It's coming very, very shortly. Thank you all for watching, guys. Till next time, goodbye.